I was 12 years old the night my father loaded my suitcase into the back of his Chevy and drove me to the edge of town without saying a word. It was November. I remember because the streetlights had that orange glow that only seems to exist in late autumn, when everything feels like it's dying slowly. The heater in the truck rattled and wheezed, but neither of us reached to turn it up. We just sat there in silence, his hands gripping the wheel so tight his knuckles went white, and me staring out the window at the houses passing by, houses with lights on in the windows, families sitting down to dinner, lives that looked nothing like mine. When he finally pulled over on Route 9, near the old gas station that had been closed for years, he turned to me. His face looked hollow in the dim light, like someone had carved out everything soft and left only the bones. "You can't come back," he said. That was it. No explanation, no apology. Just 4 words that changed everything. I didn't cry. I think I was too shocked to cry. I just nodded, grabbed my suitcase from the back, and watched his taillights disappear into the darkness. And then I stood there on that empty road, a 12-year-old girl with a battered suitcase and $43 in my pocket, trying to figure out what I'd done to deserve this. The truth is, I knew why they threw me out. I just didn't want to admit it. My mother had died 3 years earlier, a brain aneurysm. Sudden and cruel. The kind of death that doesn't give you time to say goodbye. One morning she was making pancakes in her yellow bathrobe, humming along to the radio, and by that afternoon she was gone. My father fell apart after that. Not in the loud, dramatic way you see in movies, but in the quiet way that's somehow worse. He stopped shaving, stopped talking, started drinking whiskey at breakfast and pretending he couldn't hear me when I asked him questions. Then he met Linda. Linda was everything my mother wasn't: loud, flashy, always wearing too much perfume and laughing too hard at jokes that weren't funny. She moved in 6 months after my mother died, and suddenly the house that used to smell like vanilla and old books started smelling like cigarettes and cheap air freshener. She had 2 kids of her own, both younger than me, and from the moment she walked through her door, I could feel her measuring everything: the space, the furniture, my father's attention. And me, I was in the way. That's what it came down to. Linda wanted a fresh start, a new family, and I was a living reminder of the woman who came before her. Every time my father looked at me, he saw my mother's eyes staring back at him, and I think it broke something in him that he couldn't fix. So when Linda started dropping hints, wouldn't it be easier if, and some kids just do better in other environments, my father didn't fight back. He just nodded along, like he was grateful someone had finally said it out loud. The night they threw me out, Linda's kids were in the living room watching cartoons. I could hear them laughing as I packed my things. My father stood in the doorway of my room, not helping, not speaking, just watching me fold my clothes with shaking hands. When I zipped up the suitcase, he finally cleared his throat. "There's a shelter in Riverside," he said quietly. "They'll take you in." And that was the last conversation we had for 30 years. The shelter in Riverside did take me in, but only for 3 months. After that, I bounced between foster homes, 7 different families in 6 years. Some were kind, some were indifferent. One was cruel in ways I still don't like to think about. I learned how to make myself small, how to stay quiet, how to disappear into the background of other people's lives. I learned that home wasn't a place you could count on. It was just a word people used to make themselves feel better. I dropped out of high school at 16 and got a job washing dishes at a diner on the highway. The owner, Mrs. Chen, was a tiny woman with hands scarred from decades of hot oil and hard work, but she had a soft spot for strays. She let me sleep in the storage room behind the kitchen when I had nowhere else to go, and she paid me in cash and leftover pie. She never asked questions. She just handed me an apron and put me to work. And for the first time since my mother died, I felt like someone saw me as more than a burden. I worked at that diner for 3 years, saving every penny I could. When I turned 19, I took a Greyhound bus to Denver with $800 and a backpack full of secondhand clothes. I didn't have a plan. I just knew I needed to go somewhere my father would never think to look for me. Denver was cold and overwhelming and wonderful. I got a job at a coffee shop, then a bookstore, then a small nonprofit that helped homeless teenagers find housing and job training. That's where I met Marcus. Marcus was a social worker, 6 years older than me, with kind eyes and a patient smile. He didn't try to fix me or save me. He just saw me, all of me, the broken parts and the stubborn parts and the parts that were still learning how to hope. We fell in love slowly, the way you fall asleep so gradually you don't notice until you're already there. We got married in a courthouse on a Tuesday afternoon, with 2 strangers as our witnesses. I wore a dress I'd bought from a thrift store for $12, and Marcus wore a tie his father had given him before he died. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that felt like more than enough. Over the years, we built a life. We bought a small house with a blue front door and a garden that never quite grew the way we wanted it to. We adopted 2 dogs from the shelter. We hosted Thanksgiving dinners for people who had nowhere else to go. We were happy. Not in the perfect, glossy way you see on TV, but in the messy, complicated, beautiful way that real happiness looks. But I never told Marcus the full truth about my family. He knew my mother had died and my father had sent me away, but I let him believe it was a mutual decision, some kind of arrangement made for my own good. I couldn't bring myself to say the words out loud. They didn't want me. They threw me away like garbage. So I buried that truth deep and tried to forget it was there, and for a long time, it worked. Then on a Tuesday morning in late October, I got a phone call that changed everything. I was at work, halfway through a meeting about budget allocations, when my phone buzzed. I ignored it the first time. The second time, I glanced down and saw an unfamiliar number with my old hometown area code. Something cold settled in my stomach. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway. Hello? Is this Sarah Bennett? The voice was female, professional, detached. Yes. Who's this? My name is Patricia Hollis. I'm an attorney in Riverside County. I'm calling regarding the estate of Dennis Bennett. My father. I'm sorry, I said slowly. What about him? Mr. Bennett passed away 2 weeks ago. You're listed as his next of kin. The world tilted. I reached out and pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. I haven't spoken to him in 30 years. I understand, Patricia said, her tone softening slightly. But according to his will, he left you something. A letter in a safety deposit box. You'll need to come to Riverside to claim them. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to throw my phone across the room and pretend this call had never happened. But instead, I heard myself say, when? 3 days later, Marcus and I were driving through the streets of my childhood, and I felt like I was watching my own life through a stranger's eyes. The town hadn't changed much. The same gas station, now reopened and selling overpriced coffee. The same library where my mother used to take me every Saturday. The same streets I'd walked as a little girl, back when the world still felt safe. But everything looked smaller now, faded, like a photograph left too long in the sun. Patricia's office was in a converted Victorian house downtown. She was exactly what I'd expected, mid-50s, gray suit, wedding ring on one hand and a fountain pen in the other. She shook my hand and offered us coffee, which we declined. Then she sat down behind her desk and folded her hands. I'll be direct, she said. Your father's estate is modest. The house was sold years ago. There's about $8,000 in his bank account, which will go to you after debts and funeral expenses. But that's not why he asked me to contact you. She slid an envelope across the desk. My name was written on the front in handwriting I barely recognized, shaky and uneven, like it had been written by someone whose hands wouldn't cooperate. He wrote this 6 months before he died, Patricia said quietly, and he made me promise I'd make sure you got it. I stared at the envelope like it might bite me. Marcus reached over and squeezed my hand. Do you want me to open it? I shook my head. No, I need to. The paper was thin, the ink slightly smudged. The letter was 3 pages long, but I'll never forget the way it started. Sarah, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to read this, but I need to tell you the truth. Even if it's 30 years too late, I didn't throw you out because I didn't love you. I threw you out because I loved you too much, and I didn't know how to live with that. My hands started shaking. Marcus took the letter gently and kept reading aloud. Your mother was the best person I ever knew. When she died, I died with her. I know that's not an excuse, it's just the truth. I looked at you and saw her smile, heard her laugh in your voice, and I couldn't stand it. Every time you walked into a room, I felt the weight of everything I'd lost, and it crushed me. Linda told me you'd be better off somewhere else, with people who could give you the life you deserved. And I believed her because I wanted to believe her. I wanted permission to stop feeling so much pain. So I let her convince me that sending you away was an act of love, when really it was an act of cowardice. I thought about you every single day, every birthday, every Christmas, every time I passed the diner where you used to work, wondering if you were safe, if you were happy, if you even remembered me. But I was too ashamed to reach out. I told myself you were better off without me. And maybe you were. Maybe you are. 3 years after you left, Linda took the kids and left me. She said I was too broken to fix, and she was right. I've been alone ever since. I deserve to be, but here's the part I need you to know. The part I should have told you 30 years ago. It was never your fault. None of it. You were a child, and I failed you in every way a father can fail. I let my grief swallow me whole, and I took you down with me. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. There's a safety deposit box at First National Bank. The key is with Patricia. Inside, you'll find some things that belong to your mother, her jewelry, some photographs, a few letters she wrote to you before she died but never had a chance to give you. I kept them all these years. I couldn't let them go, just like I could never really let you go. I hope you've built a good life, Sarah. I hope you found people who loved you the way you deserve to be loved. I hope you're happy. I hope you can forgive me. But I'll understand if you can't. Love. Dad. By the time Marcus finished reading, I was sobbing. Not the quiet, dignified kind of crying, but the ugly, gasping kind that comes from somewhere deep and raw. Marcus pulled me close and let me cry into his shoulder while Patricia quietly excused herself and closed the door behind her. We went to the bank that afternoon. The safety deposit box was small and unassuming, but when Patricia turned the key and lifted the lid, I felt like I was looking at a treasure chest. Inside was my mother's wedding ring, a silver locket I remembered her wearing every day, a stack of photographs held together with a rubber band, and 3 sealed envelopes with my name written on them in my mother's handwriting. I sat down on the floor of the bank vault and opened the first letter. My darling Sarah, you're 3 years old today, and you just told me you want to be an astronaut when you grow up. I love that about you, the way you dream so big. Never let anyone make you feel small. I'm writing these letters because I want you to have something from me. No matter what happens. Life is unpredictable, sweetheart. We never know how much time we have. But I need you to know this. You are loved. You are worthy. You are enough. If I'm not there to tell you in person, please read these words and believe them. They're the truest thing I've ever written. Love always. Mom's other letters were similar, short, sweet, full of the kind of wisdom and love that only a mother can give. She'd written them on my 3rd, 5th, and 7th birthdays. She'd been planning to give them to me when I was older, but she never got the chance. My father had kept them safe all these years. He'd kept everything safe. Marcus and I stayed in Riverside for 3 more days. We visited my mother's grave, which I hadn't seen since the funeral. We drove past the house where I grew up, now painted a different color and lived in by strangers. We went to the diner where Mrs. Chen had given me my first real job, but it had closed years ago and been replaced by a cell phone store. On our last day, we went to the cemetery again. This time, we visited my father's grave. It was in the same section as my mother's, just a few rows away. The headstone was simple. Dennis Bennett, beloved husband and father. Someone, probably Patricia, had left a small bouquet of flowers. I stood there for a long time, not sure what to say. Marcus stayed a few steps back, giving me space. Finally, I knelt down and placed my hand on the cold stone. I forgive you, I whispered, and I meant it. Not because he deserved it, not because what he did was okay, but because I deserved to let go of the anger I'd been carrying for 30 years. Because holding on to it was like drinking poison and expecting him to die. I forgave him for me. We drove back to Denver the next morning. In the passenger seat, I held the box of my mother's things in my lap, her jewelry, her letters, her photographs. Pieces of her I thought I'd lost forever. Marcus reached over and squeezed my hand. You okay? I looked out the window at the highway stretching ahead of us, at the sky turning pink and gold with the sunrise, at the world that suddenly felt a little bit lighter. Yeah, I said, I think I am. And for the first time in 30 years, I believed it. The truth they tried to bury wasn't some dark secret or scandalous revelation. It was something simpler and sadder, that my father had loved me, even when he didn't know how to show it. That he'd been broken by grief and made terrible choices because of it. That he'd spend the rest of his life regretting those choices, carrying the weight of them alone. He couldn't undo what he'd done, but he'd tried, in the only way he knew how, to give me back the pieces he'd taken from me. My mother's love, her words, her belief in me, and maybe that wasn't enough. Maybe nothing could ever be enough, but it was something. It was a start. Sometimes I think about that 12-year-old girl standing on the side of Route 9, watching her father's taillights disappear. I think about how scared she was, how lost, how sure she was that she'd never be okay again. And I wish I could go back and tell her, you will survive this. You will build a life. You will find love and purpose and peace. You will be okay. But I can't go back. All I can do is keep moving forward, carrying the truth with me, the painful parts and the beautiful parts, the things I lost and the things I found. And that's exactly what I'm doing. One day at a time. One step at a time. Forward.